Greetings, citizens! My name is FailureToReport, and like any heartless, bloodthirsty shark, when I detect a thrashing, bleeding animal in the open water, I come a-running. So let's jump on this helpless seal. So, maybe you haven't heard since it technically happened today, but CIG done found themselves in yet another gaming news media oopsie today when Kotaku dropped an article alleging that Cloud Imperium really screwed the puppy during the Texas winter storm by not only expecting their employees from the Austin studio to keep working through it, as much of the state was falling apart from the lack of infrastructure, but they even wanted those who couldn't to make up for it with PTO days if they were expected to be paid. Now, this article has all the atmosphere of the Forbes article all over again. Big publication highlights a Cloud Imperium failing, and every backer with an earshot comes running to say,
No, 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 it can't be true. It's impossible.
So, I wanted to discuss, not because I have some hot takes on the matter, not because I have a hate boner for CIG, and not because I have some insider super secret documents from Comrade CIG man. I want to talk about this because of the reaction that happens every single time something bad like this comes to light for CIG. Now, I'm going to start this short video off with a huge disclaimer, and if you've been around the channel enough that you watch my live streams or you hang out in Discord, you'll be able to vet what I'm about to say. I have a very strong bias against Kotaku. I hate them as a publication. Not because I don't trust their journalism, not because I think they're liars, but because I cannot stand their woke journalism. So, while people might think I have a bias against Cloud Imperium / Star Citizen in this debate, if I were going to be starting off predisposed against one party in this, it's absolutely Kotaku. So with that in mind, let's begin. First off, I want to talk about the most likely thing you're going to see fans talking about, and that's how sources aren't credible. There's no proof. Evil Kotaku's lying about sweet darling CIG. In the years that I've covered Star Citizen, I've had the chance to talk to quite a few employees about their experiences working under Chris Roberts or for the studio. It was always under the very strict condition that I never said anything identifiable, and in most cases, it was mostly for my own curiosity because repeating even a quarter of it on YouTube would have been identifiable enough for CIG to come after them for breaking their non-disclosure agreement. This is important to understand because this isn't the NDA that you agree to when you're beta testing the newest, hottest electronic arts game, or the NDA that Evocati so freely break by leaking new builds. When a game company has an employee breaking an NDA, they will absolutely action that because it sets a precedent that employees can get away with sharing inside work details, which, telling Kotaku that CIG left them out to freeze doesn't seem that big of a deal, but let's pretend for a minute that CIG actually was inventing the wheel or some great new tech that was going to revolutionize gaming. Letting your employees think that you won't enforce that NDA because you let Karen from Art tell Kotaku that you let her baby freeze but wanted to know about those spreadsheet updates, it creates a dangerous game that literally no studio is going to want to play. The seriousness of the NDA aside, there's also the matter of providing evidence. We see numerous times in the Kotaku article that they were allowed to see email proof of company correspondence regarding the winter storm and their expectations of their employees. Yet a lot of people are going to be hesitant to just take Kotaku at their word, instead going, well, why can't we see this proof from these anonymous sources? It could be fake. And unfortunately, they're not wrong. But they're also wrong. One of the biggest issues with Cloud Imperium is how absurdly big and complicated its structure and management is. You have Chris and company overseeing multiple studios who all have their own head, who then have their own managers for all of their departments, and I'm sure you have department heads as well. This means that the communication sent down to these 6 sources Kotaku cited could very well have been sent by department leaders, which would narrow down CIG's no doubt internal investigation into who the squeaky cog in Austin is to the parallel of shooting fish in a mixing bowl. This is why leaking information in this industry is so hazardous. And while some people might go, well, if they were really subjected to this, why wouldn't they come forward? Why be anonymous? I'm so glad you asked, friend. You see, Silicon Valley got wise a long time ago. The majority of tech and game companies are set up heavily in 2 states, California and Texas. Both of these states are at-will employment states. What this means is that if you were an employee of Bungie, BioWare, Activision, or even Cloud Imperium, you can be fired for almost any reason at all, as long as it isn't along the lines of, your sexual orientation, race, religion, or disability. And sadly, whistleblowing a company isn't covered in there. So, your viewer Bob and you worked at CIG, blabbed your mouth to Kotaku, they printed evidence to give their story the proof the cult members need, and now here's your HR rep saying, pack your stuff, enjoy. But it doesn't stop there. While we peasants see whistleblowing as this great noble thing whenever injustice is considered in workplaces, the fact is complaining about crappy treatment or how much of a dump your employer was will get you maybe a week of news if it's really spicy. You know, like our employer knew we were at risk of freezing to death and had no power, water, or heat, but they still wanted us to be working. However, once your moment in the spotlight is over, so is your entire career. Because there's no other game company or tech company that is going to want to hire somebody who was fired, especially publicly, for ratting out their last employer, especially to the press. So while you can sit there reading Kotaku's article thinking, nah, bullshit, we'd hear about that and see proof, keep in mind you're asking somebody to throw out not only their current job, but their entire profession just to appease your proof boner. So then, the real meat of what I've seen over the last few hours falls to a major talking point. CIG couldn't ask them to keep working during that. It would be illegal or something. Well, God bless this country, founded on capitalism, where the laws are founded to protect the little guy. Wait. You see, this exact issue that Cloud Imperium is being accused of by Kotaku was reported on by other outlets and for other companies, but just never got the same traction compared to something like this where in the gaming world we treasure our dream crafters, and to hear that the companies making our dreams can be evil bad guy cartoon villains is just so shocking that we can't help but get outraged through disbelief. You see, in the great state of Texas, because of their labor laws, there is no requirement that employers have to pay you during a natural disaster like the winter storm last month. And in fact, many employers told their workers, use PTO time or come in. So when you read the words in the Kotaku article alleging that Austin studio employees were told, do work or don't get paid, it shouldn't seem like some impossible stretch of the imagination that this was actually something that happened. So now that we've covered all the important facts you need considering when reading this article to be able to understand the background, laws, and what is at stake for the 6 sources who narked on CIG to Kotaku, let's talk about the allegations inside of the article itself. From the start, Kotaku sets the stage by discussing how Austin is a major hub for a lot of game companies, which is true, and then puts forward that many of them closed down and told employees to take care of themselves during this storm, but CIG did not. Now, I don't live in Austin, so I'm not sure how widespread this affected everybody, but to my knowledge, there was still work being done by Austin employees at this time, so I'm going to go ahead and assume that this was accurate, that Austin didn't go into total shutdown, take care of yourself mode. Maybe it was tiered and some were told it's not important right now, but some people seem to be working still. If you're crafty, you'll be able to figure out who. Kotaku then goes on to state that they received a statement from CIG during the week of the snowstorm, not just before this article was published today, saying that Austin employees banded together to provide each other with aid and that CIG at a company level has been very understanding and concerned about the situation the Texas team is facing, to which Kotaku sources claim was not true. Now, it was in this third paragraph and this portion of the article where I went from going, this is Kotaku bullshit, to, oh, okay, maybe. You see, they state that 6 sources all claim communication was the biggest problem, and that one Austin office manager told employees, many of whom had lost power, to figure out how to make up for lost work time, specifically this week as a first option. Now, anybody who has been around Star Citizen for longer than 6 months knows that there are 2 crippling issues with this project. Number 1, communication. They are terrible at it. Every single year, they fumble this attribute horribly, more often than not, multiple major times a year. And that's because, number 2, management. Cloud Imperium's management is a nightmare, from Chris Roberts' micromanaging style to managers who compete with each other, steal credit for junior staff, and have reportedly had some pretty toxic attitudes over the years. So with those 2 things very well in mind, that third paragraph gave a lot of credibility to the article for me, but hey, we'll see where this thing goes, right? The paragraph then continues that the office manager told employees, assuming the roads are clear, we can manage a few people in the studio. If all else fails, then enter PTO for whatever time you can't make up. So this is the manager saying, hey, we have 313 coming due. My upstairs wants my work done, so I want you to try to make up lost time this week. We can fit some people in the studio to catch up if the roads are clear, and if you can't get in and do your work, file PTO or you're not getting paid. Now the timeline is a little hard to figure because Kotaku doesn't say specifically when they received the response from CIG regarding the anonymous sources alleging that CIG left them out to freeze, but the message has all of the hallmarks of a typical CIG "we did our part" damage control that they have become so used to making. Saying, studio leadership reached out to all 100 plus Austin employees through their managers and individually to offer support and continues to do so. The article then continues, during the week of February 15th, sources recalled receiving just 2 communications from company executives, one on the 16th after large portions of the workforce had already lost power, and one next week on the 21st after things had started getting back to normal. The first email, which Kotaku claims to have viewed, began saying that safety is the utmost importance and should continue to be prioritized over everything else, promising to be flexible on work schedules and supporting employees dealing with power outages. However, that it ultimately came back to the same idea as the prior message from managers. Time off, aka not being able to do your work during the storm, would require use of PTO and work would continue despite the statewide emergency. The sources then told Kotaku that employees who hadn't lost power or cell pushed back, noting that if power issues continued, it could cost them an entire week of PTO or more, considering many homes and apartments were dealing with burst pipes, structural damage, flooding, and so on, or that some employees simply wouldn't have the spare PTO in the first place. However, sources claim that CIG management held firm. The source then goes on to say that in response to further expressions of concern, we were told to work directly with our managers for help. Okay, so this doubled back to what we were talking about in the beginning of the video. What CIG is trying to force their devs to do here is 100% legal thanks to Texas labor laws. It might seem insane or cruel or insensitive, but technically it is totally legal. There isn't some great crime that is being covered up and now exposed by Kotaku. It's simply a company taking advantage of an incredibly shitty labor law system to say, keep working or you don't get paid. The only thing really damning in this entire situation right now is that if these sources are true, which I'm inclined to believe they are at this point, Cloud Imperium is treating their employees worse than those big evil AAA companies they're protecting us from. Which Kotaku then highlights in the next paragraph, where they now discuss how companies like the dreaded Solus Electronic Arts and other companies either temporarily shut down their operations in Texas, or in the case of Gearbox and Electronic Arts, provided hotel accommodations and emergency supply deliveries, as well as a check-in system to make sure their employees were okay. They then further highlight that the sources speaking with Kotaku had never heard of CIG offering any such service, despite some of them having apartments that were completely flooded out. When they heard about other studios shutting down, they asked CIG upper management why similar options weren't being taken for them, and they never heard back. The next few paragraphs are the sources talking about how they all had to band together to get through the storm, sharing tips on when supplies could be purchased and where, and that the entire Austin team banded together to take care of each other. They then comment that there was zero attempt made from the other CIG studios to share information that may have been useful to their situation, claiming CIG upper management failed to communicate the enormity of the situation to other studios like LA and the UK. Going further to say, head leadership for the company never appeared to acknowledge we even faced a natural disaster and seemed to neglect to communicate our situation to the other studios. This is another part in the article that seems pretty on par for Cloud Imperium management. Who wants to tell Chris that work can't continue as he wants it because Texas is literally frozen to a standstill? Nah, thanks. I'm good, fam. I'll just sit on this and we could discuss it at the next meeting. Like, hey, it's just a few tasks that are taking longer than hoped for. I'm not about to tell him that Austin is essentially a total loss for this month. Sources then go on to say that they were talking to fellow Austin employees and hearing comments from other offices in CIG like, oh, they just wanted a snow day. Why should we give them snow days? The next few paragraphs are more of the same. CIG essentially being oblivious to what was happening with their Texas office, finally saying employees learned on the 21st of February that upper management told them executives in CIG simply weren't aware of how dire the situation in Austin had gotten, and by the time they were aware, it was already over. So again, this is another glimpse at that hallmark CIG management in action, especially when you drop the word executives in there. Somebody in the leadership chain probably upsold the readiness of the Austin office so it wouldn't look bad on them, or so they would be able to duck a shitty conversation with Chris Roberts expecting things to keep rolling towards patch 313. The next paragraph is from an employee saying pretty much the same, as he says, "All I can really say is that it feels like a breakdown in communication, that the severity was not realized by the people that had the power making these decisions." However, I'm more inclined to believe the next person's take, who goes on to say, "When I heard the response that they were unaware, I was like, they're either gaslighting us or admitting to gross incompetence." And I'll back this person up when they say, because yeah, the news of how bad the situation got was everywhere. Look, I live in Michigan, and even I knew how incredibly bad things were down in Texas, and I have literally zero vested interest financially or otherwise to know. So you'd think someone in the leadership pool running a nearly $500 million game project would have taken the time to figure that out. The next paragraph talks about how in the aftermath, Austin management offered to find better solutions for the missed work issue, and that eventually Chris Roberts sent out an email, which again Kotaku says they have seen, telling employees that they would be paid for the cycle regardless. This last bit is typical Chris Roberts. He usually lets situations spiral completely out of hand before finally doing what he should have done in the first place and stepping up as a leader. We've seen this exact pattern out of Chris on literally every major issue in Star Citizen's past, where he's had to finally bite the be a man bullet and step up and say, "Okay, my bad, I guess I got this." The last few paragraphs are about the state of the company, seemingly made by the sources, as well as some comments on the development of the project. I'm not really going to get into these, even though from my perspective, this all checks out with how things seem to be in the project, but it's not really relevant to this specific issue. So, when the dust settles and the ice thaws, what do we take away from this? Cloud Imperium fucked up. They fucked up big time by trying to ride the totally legal labor laws of Texas that come with really, really bad optics if somebody shines a light on it. As much as we all love gaming, and unfortunately we tend to draw these pedestals up to place our heroic game creators upon, but the truth of the matter is they are all companies working to make money. And while what Cloud Imperium did, either through total absolute incompetence of management, or just not caring about the conditions they were placing on their employees who were already having to worry about not freezing to death or losing their homes, the sad fact is that this kind of employer behavior is entirely legal in the state it occurred. I'm going to close on a few thoughts regarding the "no, everyone was super happy and CIG was great" comments that were posted by a few CIG employees. Look, these people work for the company. One of them is probably the most forward-facing employee next to Chris Roberts himself now that Sandy Gardner has stepped back from the spotlight. Their job is literally PR. As much as I'm trying to be less of an asshole to individuals, and I've definitely thrown my fair share of jabs at this specific person in the years past, but the fact is they represent the company, and I'm pretty sure they're even in the management chain for Austin. For all of the reasons we talked about at the beginning of this video, no employee from Austin's office is going to step forward on Twitter, Spectrum, or Reddit and go, "Actually, these guys are fluffing the issue. This stuff totally happened. Everything isn't as it seems. Please help us. They're enslaving our very souls." It's very easy to suppress an anonymous source. They can't defend their side. They have to give as much as they can to a third party to represent them and hope it's enough to let people see what they're dealing with. And then once it prints, they have to sit back and watch the company twist and defend every angle, knowing that if they speak up, it's their job and their way of life gone. So before you go jumping straight on a certain person's dick because they say, "Everyone I know said how amazing CIG was to them during the storm," use a little critical analysis. Step back from the situation and assess the laws around the issue. Look at the patterns of conduct from CIG, who have had almost a decade of complaints from former employees and current ones made anonymously, and ask yourself, is it really likely that Kotaku didn't bother vetting the hell out of these sources and seeing real proof of company communications after Cloud Imperium went straight to threatening litigation when the escapists didn't cover their bases, including giving CIG a heads up by getting statements from them back in February when all of this was happening regarding these allegations? Or is it because they gotta get them clicks? Now, I'm only doing this video because it's quick and easy to bang this one out, and I know for a fact that the next time I stream literally anything, even if it's FTR plays solitaire, people are going to keep asking me over and over again if I saw the Kotaku article and what I thought about it. Well, now you know what I think about this entire mess. I absolutely believe the article is probably authentic, and as much as it sadly doesn't surprise me that CIG would act like this, it wasn't illegal. They didn't break any laws. They aren't doing anything that's going to get them in any trouble with any federal organization if all of this is true, but it absolutely couldn't be because they're like the good guys of gaming, saving us from the evil publishers, and Chris will lead us into space game nirvana. Plus, that one CIG guy said on Reddit that CIG was the best company they've ever worked for, so no, it couldn't be. It couldn't be true. It's probably all a lie. I wish I could say I was sadly disappointed by this kind of behavior from CIG, because even though they are legally able to demand employees use their PTO if they weren't going to be able to work to avoid paying them for time missed, it fits the patterns of conduct and behavior from CIG, and as one source put it, it's just about the money and not their employees. I am Failure Report. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time, citizen.